Is there enough of a contrast between me and the background?
The
It
background's
looks
pretty
like this.
dark.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we want though,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, let me just raise this up just a hair. Okay, are we straight?
So I need to look at it.
You can look wherever. I can sit over here and you can look at me. You can look. This will make it feel like you're talking right to whoever's listening.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, is that gonna, oh, look, we have one viewer. I don't know how to tell.
One what?
Someone's watching.
Oh,
Okay, if you're there, comment so we can see if we're doing it right. We're newbies. We're
maybe
newbies
you
to
should have had
Facebook.
Ellie look at it.
Well, I have
Since she's the expert.
I'm just gonna open it up on my Facebook account.
Oh,
Okay. And this white right here is at your counter. The video cuts off right there. So it's a square video.
and the counter is in it.
The counter, see, you can barely see your hands.
Oh,
So where it cuts off, well, it's fine. But I'm just saying
Yeah.
that line right there
okay.
is where the video cuts off.
All right.
So I'm going to get on and see if it shows we're on. Okay. I don't think it's showing we're live. Oh. Yes, we are.
Hallelujah.
Okay. I think it's working. Okay, so now I'm going to record, set this up to record.
You need a chair over there.
Yeah, I think I'll, do you have like a folding chair?
Yeah, right in the office by the desk.
Text Amy and John and see if it's working.
Shouldn't you sit closer to the...
Yep, okay, John said it is. I'm tuned in. Okay, so Grandma, you can say hi to everybody while I get this up.
Hello, everybody. My dear, dear family that I love so much. My full name, in case you don't know, is Dorothy Glennis Gardner Chatterton. And I'm 84 years old right now. And Holly will tell me when to start.
I'm just about ready. And if you guys have any comments or questions, I have my phone so I can be watching for them and ask her to. My homemade tripod isn't working so well right now.
And questions would probably be welcome because I don't quite know what I'm saying.
Okay, Grandma.
Okay, I'd like to start with a little bit of background on how things were at the time I was born in America and in my family. I was born May 21st, 1932, so the Depression was pretty bad at that time. When my dad and mom married on August 25th, 1926, Dad worked at the railroad, and so he had a steady job with a steady paycheck. In the late 1920s, the railroad, the new test came out that they could show you a picture, and if you could tell all the colors, you weren't colorblind. If you could read the number in the colors, you weren't colorblind. Well, my dad was colorblind, and so the railroad fired him because he was a signalman, and they did not want colorblind people trying to give signals. So he was fired. They had to they had to move off of West Day in Pocatello, where they live, and move out to a one-room little house on Hawthorne and Cottage. When I was born, Peggy was 5, Dawn was 4, and Shirley was 11 and a half months old. And so I was born in the St. Anthony Hospital, and not having any money, my dad wired the St. Anthony chicken coop to pay for my bill. After 10 days in the hospital, Mom came home, and then Dad went and got the other kids that were staying with my aunt and brought them in. And so she had 2 babies, 11 and a half months old and brand new, which I think would be very hard for her. He didn't ever get another job, although he tried and tried, but it was a depression. No one had jobs, or if they did, they were lucky. And so he did what he could. They raised a huge garden. My grandpa Ziegler had given him a cow, and that was the source of all of our milk and cottage cheese and butter, which Mom made. So she brought me home, and that's where I spent my first couple of 3 years. Of course, I don't remember anything from there. When I was about 3 and a half, we moved to Grace, Idaho, because Grandpa Ziegler knew a man where Dad could get a job as an electrician. We lived in a house, and that's where I had my earliest memory. I was trying to open a door, and I couldn't reach the doorknob, so I got a chair and drug it over there and tried to open it. Well, it opened a crack, but it wouldn't open anymore because my chair was right there. And I got so frustrated, I remember I cried. My mom and dad thought it was hilarious. The next memory I had, clear memory, was another place we moved to called the Calvary Barn. And the reason it was called that is because the Calvary, the U.S. Calvary, had been stationed there. And they had built this huge house with like barracks with all the rooms upstairs, and then a big barn, a big red barn. It had been abandoned for quite a few years, so it was empty and run down. And I don't know what they paid to live there, but I don't think it could have been much. Anyway, we loved that house because we could run through those upstairs rooms and play hide and go seek and all of those good games. My Aunt Ruth came to visit and brought her family. She had a little baby, and so she went up into one of the bedrooms and was sitting there nursing the baby. I came into the room, and then I hurried to leave, and she said, "No, come here, Glennie, and look at what I'm doing." And she showed me, and I thought that was the worst thing I'd ever seen, that baby had to eat something that came out of her body. It just really bothered me, and I ran out of the room. She invited me to try it. I didn't want to try it.
She asked you if you wanted to.
Yeah, she says, "Come here and try it." No, and ran
That's
away,
funny.
so she couldn't make me do that.
So, Grandma, right now, Eric is on, and Amy is watching,
How neat.
and Jan. And Jan said, "Grandma, you look so beautiful."
Oh, thank
And then
you.
she said, "Was 10 days a typical stay in the hospital after having a baby?" That's
Oh,
a long
yes.
time.
Yes, they wouldn't let you go home before 10 days were up. And I'll say more about that when Neil gets born. Okay, so my next memory was in the Calvary Barn. And we called the house the Calvary Barn. And Don, who was 4 years older than I, he was 8 or 9, took me for a little walk. And I don't remember walking to the place, but Grace, Idaho has a ravine running through it full of big rocks, and you can climb down into it, and it was quite exciting. I'd never been there before, not allowed to go. But he took me. we climbed down into the ravine. We started to climb up, and there was a big rock that I couldn't reach the top of. So Don got behind me and lifted me up. And as my face and head came over the edge of the rock and I was hanging on with my hands, I heard this horrible rattle sound. And right across from me on this big slab of rock was a rattlesnake. And it was coiled with its tail in the air, waving around. And it scared me, of course, so I dropped into Don's arms.
And how old were you?
Probably 4 and a half.
Oh my goodness.
And we ran home as fast as we could go.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was scary. From that house, we moved into we called it the greenhouse. It was on the outskirts of Grace, right on the edge of the houses and blocks and all that. And it was a 1-bedroom house. And so my dad and mom, their bed was in the living room, and all 4 of us kids slept in the one and only bedroom. And of course it was an outhouse and no running water. I don't think they had that anywhere we had lived before. And so Dad built a toilet, or put a toilet in the corner of our bedroom, and Mom hung a heavy drape around it. And we would be in bed in the morning and we'd hear Dad come in and use the bathroom. And we all pretended we were asleep. We ignored the noises and the delicate scent. But it was so nice to have a toilet in the house. And we lived in that little house till I was in the 2nd grade.
Wow.
And I want to go back because I wanted to tell you about that first house that they brought me home to when I was born. It was a 1-room house out on Hawthorne and Cottage, which I said before. And they had a big bureau in the 1 room. They had a huge old cook stove that she built fires and cooked in. And there was a big bureau and a baby crib over in the corner. Now, Peggy told me all this because I have no memory of that. And the floorboards were so far apart that when Mom cleaned the floor, she had to be careful not to let any water go down through the floorboards because they would drip all over everybody's bed downstairs. To go downstairs, you went out of the house, lifted up the cellar door, and went down the stairs. And Dad would get us all down there and all cozy and everything, and then he would shut that door on us. In the summer, he'd leave it open so that the air could come in. The walls were dirt. I suppose the floor was too. But those were the conditions that they were living in. They felt very blessed that they were able to grow a big garden, enough that Mom canned 400 quarts of vegetables and fruit one year. They always bought peaches in Utah from a guy that came up from Utah. And that's what they lived on in the wintertime. I always thought that they did not ever take welfare, and I think I've said that to some of you. But I found out rereading the story I wrote, it's here somewhere, that Peggy had told me all about that place. They did get commodities from the WPA, which is now called entitlements.
Where was that house, Grandma?
On the corner of Hawthorne Road and Cottage. And it doesn't exist there anymore. The house across the street is still the same one that was there. And that woman was very kind to my mother and gave her food and things sometimes. There's an apartment building there now. But it was a good-sized place. They had an acre in a kitchen garden with the vegetables and things.
Yeah, to can 400 quarts. That's a lot.
A lot. Well, a lot of it was probably peaches. Anyway, Grandpa Ziegler encouraged them to move to Grace, and they did. But the housing wasn't any better there.
Grandma, Eric said, "This is perfect for us so far away. We love you and miss you, Grandma. This should be done more often."
Oh, I love you guys. I love Facebook because I get to see the baby and both of you. And by the way, congratulations. they're having another baby.
Oh,
Did you know
yay.
that?
No, I
You didn't know.
that.
Oh, well, I broke the news. Sorry. Is that as far as you want me to go? Or
No, let's keep going.
okay. Mom and Dad had some friends. Actually, Dad was in business with Charlie Erickson and his wife Wanda. They had a little shop. He did plumbing. Charlie did electrical. They barely eked out a living. I remember Dad being upset one day that he was in the middle of a job and had to come back home and get another fitting for the plumbing, and it cost a nickel for gas. He knew exactly, and he lost his whole profit by forgetting that piece of plumbing. Anyway, Charlie and Wanda moved to Oneida, and Charlie worked for the electric company then. He got a job, and they took the newspaper and they saved all the funny papers, and they would come and visit with us, and we would all over the floor have funny papers, the comics spread out, and the kids would read the comics, but I didn't know how to read then. And I remember being so frustrated and looking at those words, and why can't I read? I want to read. So when I started first grade, I was so happy. I was the happiest girl in town. The thing is, well, I'll tell you about my name later. Mom and Dad and the whole family called me Glennie for Glennis, although my first name was Dorothy. Mom thought that was too formal for a brand new baby, so she called me Glennie. And when I started first grade, I did not want to be called Glennie. I thought it was a baby's name. I wanted to be called Dorothy. And so I have a story about that, and I wrote a little poem about it, and I'll give it to you tomorrow or something, or next time we get together. But anyway, I started first grade. Shirley had flunked first grade the year before. And so we were in the same class all through the years till we got out of fifth grade. Well, actually, in junior high, we were still all in the same classes. So it was good. We didn't know we were poor till we started to go to school. And one day, Bonnie Hart-Vixen, the cutest girl in the class, asked us to come over and play after school. So we went to her home, and she showed us all through her house. And they had a lawn with grass on it. And they had bedrooms so that some of the kids slept in one, other kids slept in the other. The parents had their own bedroom. We couldn't believe the richness of that little house. And they had an inside bathroom. Of course, we had to try it. So after we were through, in walked her big sister, Lois. And Lois just screamed at her and said, "What are you doing, letting these dirty little girls come into our home and use the bathroom?" And she said, "You go home right now." So we left, and we weren't friends with Bonnie. Bonnie ignored us from then on. So that's the first time I realized that we were poor. And I thought anybody that had a lawn had to be rich. Most of the people in Grace did not have a lawn. The water cost too much, and every penny mattered at that time. And speaking of pennies, there was a wonderful old janitor at that school. He lived in an apartment in the basement, and his name was Mr. Greenwood. Everybody loved Mr. Greenwood. He was like a grandfather to everybody. And if you had a penny, if you were lucky enough to have a penny, you could go down to his apartment, knock on the door, and buy an all-day sucker from him to eat at recess. That was a big event. The only time I ever remember getting a sucker, although I probably got more than one, was one day I started to school with Shirley and our friend Pauline Ray. And we were walking down the main street of Grace, and Pauline opened her coat and said, "Look, I have a new dress on today." And we looked, and I said, "Well, I have a new jumper on today." And I opened my coat, and I had forgotten to put on my jumper. I ran home crying every step of the way, which was that good half mile. And I went in crying, and Mom and Dad, "What's the matter? Why aren't you in school?" I didn't wear my dress. And so I put on my beautiful new jumper that Mom had made from a dress that Dad's sister had given us a box of clothes. And I thought it was gorgeous. It was black with big pink and red roses all over it, which is really first grade attire. Anyway, I put my dress on and they gave me a penny. So I ran as fast as I could all the way to school. It was a good mile, maybe a little more. And at recess, I went down to Mr. Greenwood's and bought an all-day sucker. And I had to give Shirley licks, but I wouldn't give anybody else any licks. Oh, those were fun days. But, you know, the prejudice, the whole town was LDS. We were not. And Shirley and I definitely felt the prejudice. One night we were on our way home from school and this mean little boy named Billy with red hair and freckles was on his bicycle and he started chasing us and running around us and coming back at us and taunting us. You don't even go to church. You little girls are no good. Well, he didn't say little girls. He was a little older than us. But anyway, we wished that Mom and Dad would go to church. And I do remember one night, 2 men knocked at the door. I was in the 1st or 2nd grade. We moved away when I got in the 3rd grade, so that's how I know how old I was. And so us kids lined up on Mom and Dad's bed and sat quietly, which we minded. We knew to do that. And these men talked to my parents. And then I remember they took us to church. Probably after that, just one time we went to church. And I remember that these boys would come down the aisle. And they had a pitcher of water in a glass, and they'd pour a little bit of water in the glass. I don't know, maybe they'd fill the glass and send it down the aisle, and everybody would take a sip. And that was the sacrament water. But we only went the one time.
So did you grow up with any religion at all?
Well, that much until then. And then when we moved to Soda Springs when I was in the 3rd grade, we went to primary with all the kids. And we were a lot happier there. We were more accepted. They weren't cliquish or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, yes, we went to primary there, and my mother taught primary for a while. So yes, we went to primary. We didn't go to church or anything, but primary was on Wednesday after school. So we'd leave the school and all go 2 or 3 blocks to the church, and we got to go with them. We felt so alienated with the church in grace, although I'm sure I didn't know that word then.
Yeah.
But I remember one really snowy day. The snow was just swirling everywhere. It must have been windy. And we got out of school, but none of the kids came out. Or some of them might have, I don't remember. Anyway, we saw lights on in the basement of the school. And we went over to one of the windows and crouched down and looked in the basement. And here were our classmates and some other classes dancing. And they were doing the Lambeth Walk. That was the name of the dance. And they were having a church program, and they practiced in the school because the heat was on in there. Mr. Greenwood kept it warm. So they went down in the basement of the school to practice the dance for church, which I don't think they could do that these days.
No.
Anyway, I remember how bad we felt and how we longed to be part of the group, but we weren't. Although we had some little friends. So that was the beginning of my big life, big long life.
Wasn't your dad an atheist?
You know, I know he wasn't. When he got old, he started writing a lot of poetry. And I remember one of the poems, he writes about the renewal, the spring renewal of the plants and trees and the gardens start to grow under God's hand. But when we were little, I remember him saying more than once, there is no heaven. He never said there is no God. There is no heaven. There is no hell. And when you're dead, you're, swear word, dead. And that's been so hard to overcome those words. I still have just instantaneous flashes of, thank you, Lord, if you're really there. So it's been hard. But I'm so thankful that we started church in 2003 back again. I'll tell all that in another story. And it took me a while to really get a testimony, but I have one now.
Well, our parents' words are,
What?
our parents' voices are strong in our heads. What they say.
Especially when you're little.
Yeah, yeah, very impressionable.
I think that Dad would say that when he'd been drinking. That's what I think now. I don't know what I thought then. But I know he was always really happy and gay when they were going to go out for a party or to the bar or something. And one night he was in such a good mood and he was singing, and we all loved it when he was in a good mood. He was a good man, but he had a temper. And so he thought it would be a good practical joke to play on me. And I was probably 5. I wasn't in school yet. I was sitting in that little wooden rocking chair that I still have that sat in the corner of the living room for a long time. I was sitting on that, and I was so little that I only took up part of the chair. And there was a bare spot there by me. And they started to go out the door. And then Dad, for some reason, turned around and picked up a big piece of wood, because we had a wood stove that we had to keep going. And he picked that up, and just in 2 strides, he walked across the room, bang, bang, and went wham, right on the chair beside me. And I screamed and started to cry and scream. And Mom got mad. Howard, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just playing a joke. She can't take a joke. So he had a little streak in him that I'll tell more about that too later on.
How did your parents meet? I don't think I have seen that.
Lucille was Dad's sister, the one that gave us the clothing. And she and Mom met at Pocatello High School. And they became friends. Mom lived in She must have been, I don't know why they were here. I don't know that part. But Dad was from Ingham. And so, I know. And they went to a dance in a little town that doesn't even exist anymore, between Grace and Lava. And I'll think of the name after I'm through with this. But anyway, they went to that dance, and Dad and Mom met each other. And when they went home after the dance, Mom and Dad sat close to each other. And then they started writing letters and talking to each other. Dad was a signal man on the railroad and would go all over and be gone. My mother lived here and went to school, I guess. And when she got out of high school, she opened a little hat shop and made hats for ladies in Montpelier, Idaho.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she did. And then they wrote sweet letters to each other. And I've got the letters.
Oh, do you?
But I think I've loaned them to, I think Lori might have them. Maybe I still have them. I don't know. Anyway, the letters just have a sweet innocence that you don't see today.
That's neat. Didn't you and Grandpa meet at a dance? So you both met at dances?
No,
No.
I was at a New Year's Eve party.
Oh, New Year's
And we
Eve
did
party.
dance
Okay.
later, but
I was thinking it
Yeah.
was a dance.
and I'll tell that story.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is probably way too much detail, and
No, it's only been, let's see, I don't even know. Oh, yes, I do. About 20, 25 minutes.
that's long enough probably.
Okay. Anything else before we go then?
Well, I'm so delighted that you're doing this, and I hope you kids all love it, because it is the stories of your grandparents and so on. And as we go on, I will tell a little more about my mother's parents and my dad's parents, and you can get acquainted with them a little bit. You know, my mother's mother died when Mom was 13 years old, and so that's a story to tell. Anyway, I love you all. Come and see me on Facebook. I'm a famous movie star now.